Hello and welcome to this episode of Lasting Transformation with me, Alun Parry. I'm the author of How to Remove Trauma Response, a Memory Reconsolidation guidebook for therapists and coaches. And what I want to look at today is the question of what makes a good session when it comes to therapy or coaching. One of the things I notice when people start learning about memory reconsolidation itself, which of course is the brain mechanism that we all have that is able to transform and overwrite emotional learning completely, so that any of these sorts of psychological blocks or even trauma responses can literally be overwritten and erased. A lot of therapy approaches are what we might think of as counteractive. In other words, they keep the old learning and just try to manage it better. What memory reconsolidation does is it gets rid of that old learning completely. And so there's a real ease in terms of solving that problem rather than having to continually manage it better. Now, when people learn that this is possible and start to actually work in a memory reconsolidation way, what I notice happens is that people start to put a lot of pressure on themselves that every session has to trigger memory reconsolidation. And so the only definition of a good therapy or coaching session is one where something is reconsolidated, where an old learning has actually been removed for good. And I think this is a mistake that puts a lot of pressure on ourselves and on our clients and on the sessions itself. So what I want to talk about today is what it is that makes a good session. And what I want to do is give you some clear criteria for what a good session actually looks like, because it's not simply that you get to an outcome of memory reconsolidation. So in this episode, I'm going to give you 3 different criteria that is going to allow you to think through your sessions and assess your sessions in a much gentler way, but still in a way which isn't going to fob you off and make you think that you're making progress when you're not, but is going to actually talk about and isolate and identify the progress that you are genuinely making. So there's 3 different criteria that I want to look at today. One is the clarity of the problem that you're working with. The other one is around what I would think of as discovery work. And finally, reconsolidation itself. So there are 3 different ways, as I think of my sessions and the sessions of the people that I coach inside the Memory Reconsolidation Elite Coaching Academy, where these are good guiding points, good milestones where you can reflect with a lot of satisfaction on the session that has just happened and know that you've gotten to a good place with it. So the first one is problem clarity. Now, there is a particular way in which you can explore the client's problem in such a way that it acts as a springboard to going into deeper discovery, which I'll talk about in a moment, the deeper discovery. But when I'm coaching people inside of the coaching academy, what I tend to notice is that when people are getting muddled in the discovery side or are finding it difficult to trigger reconsolidation, a big part of the reason is that they don't yet have clarity on the problem. And so often we have to spin back in order to get clarity on the problem. And that's how important problem clarity actually is. So if you can finish a session and both you and the client actually understand the problem that you're working on, and crucially as well, what they want instead, then that's genuinely a good session. Let me talk about that second part, what they want instead. A very common issue that I notice amongst practitioners is we get overly interested in the problem. In fact, there are many therapeutic approaches where what people are trying to do is actually just categorize the problem. And they'll categorize the problem because they have a mistaken sense that everybody with the same problem needs the same kind of thing in order to help with that problem. So everyone with depression should be worked with in this way, and everyone with anxiety should be worked with in that way. And everybody with this or everybody with that, everyone with low self-esteem needs to be responded to in that way. And it's a falsehood, really, because as we'll see in the discovery work in a moment, everyone is bringing their own reason why that problem is essential. And even though the presentation is the same, it's not going to have the same reason for being there. A little bit like if you see people at a train station. They're all at a train station, but they're all there for a different reason. Some of them are going to jump on the train to Prescott, and some of them are going to Wigan, and so it goes. And so a lot of practitioners will get overly focused on the problem. And what I'm interested in really is less so the problem, but the discovery work that's about to follow in a moment. But crucially, I like to find out about the problem in terms of finding out what is specific and situational about it, because that's going to be really useful later on when you're verifying, did this actually work? Because those same specific situations will show up and the problem won't be there. So it's really helpful to get some clarity around that. But what I'm always interested in is to find out what they want instead. What's their desired outcome, in other words? Because if we know what their desired outcome is, well, it does two things. Firstly, it gives us a direction of travel. If I was to jump into a taxi cab, the first thing that they want to know from me is, where do you want to go? And if I can't tell the taxi driver with any clarity where I want to go, then we're not going to be there. We're not going to end up there at all. Or at least if we end up there, it's going to be by chance. So we need to fashion some sense of a desired outcome from their initial problem. So you've got some specifics, you've got some situationals, and it's like, okay, so what do you want instead? If our work together was useful, what's that going to look like in exactly the same specific situation? How would you like to be feeling? How would you like to be responding in that particular situation instead? And so once you've got that, it gives you that clarity of where it is are we aiming for? How will we know when we've arrived? When things have been reconsolidated and we're looking to check that, we can go back to that same specific situation and see, is it now more like the desired outcome? Is it still like it was at the beginning? And it can be a tool for verification, basically. But the other thing that it does is it also acts as a springboard to doing some discovery work. Now, as I say, I'm going to talk about discovery work in a moment, so I won't say too much about that. But when you have a desired outcome, that gives you a place where you can drop somebody into an imagined experience and notice what internal opposition or discomfort arises when they inhabit the very thing that they have said that they actually want. And so I'll talk about more about that in a moment, but you can see there, can't you? You've got the embryo there of the internal discomfort simply by connecting somebody to what it is that they want instead. The other reason why getting clarity on a problem is so important is, well, you'll all recognize this. What often happens is clients come with a problem or a set of problems in their life. And the temptation is to work with everything. The temptation, I suppose, is to stay confused and unclear and try and muddle through anyway when you're working with the client. And I think that's a mistake. And so this is why I think getting problem clarity is a really good idea. One of the mistakes that I see people making in terms of in terms of memory reconsolidation is that just working with too many brain pathways at once. And so they've got a bag of different emotional learnings, neuroanatomically in different brain pathways. And they're trying to come up with some sort of mismatch that's going to mismatch several of them at once. And they may theoretically exist, but it really makes life harder. And it makes it life harder as well, even just in terms of doing the discovery work, because you're working on several cases at once, basically. So one of the all-important things, and one of the reasons why I'll often come back to the problem stage when I'm coaching some of the therapists and coaches inside the coaching academy, is that when we do get foggy on the discovery work, or even when we're attempting reconsolidation, it's often because we haven't really zoomed in on a particular problem. So from all of the stuff in there, get into an understanding of what's going to make the biggest difference, biggest positive difference for the client if we were to focus on that. Because when we are able to zoom in, and it doesn't mean that we're not going to deal with the other things at all, but we queue them up basically, much like an old-fashioned newspaper editor would, with all the most important stuff coming first. So when we zoom into the stuff which is going to be a problem which is going to have the biggest positive impact once it's been overcome, and we just start with that clarity, with that singularity, it makes everything after that so much easier, because you're working on this one thing, and then the discovery work is much more forensic as well and much more focused. And then when we're coming to mismatch something, we're mismatching something that has a real clarity to it as well. And the clearer that we can be, the more likely it is that we're going to get reconsolidation. And so hopefully you can see that if you go into a session and by the end of the session, you understand what the problem is, and the client understands what the problem is, and you know what they want instead, and they're connected to what they want instead. And you've got a clarity where you're not just dealing with this nebulous cloud, but you've helped the client to get to a particular issue that you're going to be working on, how valuable that is. In fact, inside the Coaching Academy, and this is what we did on our most recent live therapy demo, we actually have something where it's a tool, a technique, which is called problem mapping, which gets everything out on the table, allows the client to draw the links between the various issues that they're battling, and then helps them decide which will be the most transformative problem and aspect to actually work on that would give them the most positive impact. And so if you finish a session and you've made steps on the way to that, even if it's over a number of sessions, these are really good sessions. And okay, reconsolidation hasn't happened. The client still has the problem because you're still working on it. But still, that's a really, really good session, because at that first phase of problem clarity, if you can get problem clarity, if you can get an understanding of your direction of travel, everything else is going to be much, much easier. Now, the second thing in terms of discovery work, in terms of criteria rather for a good session, is discovery. Most of our work is in discovery. What we're really trying to find out is, why is it essential that this problem exists? So a lot of programs will focus on diving deep into the problem. A lot of approaches will use a willpower approach, especially in coaching, I'd say, of come on, let's just power through. And all of this discomfort, just ignore it and power through to the desired outcome. The way I work and the way that I teach inside of the Coaching Academy is to find out why the problem is essential. Because you've always got kind of two parts of the client in the room. The one that wants the change and is very sincere about wanting the change, but also a part of the client which doesn't want the change at all and uses their own nervous system against them because it thinks it's dangerous. It thinks that it's absolutely essential to maintain the problem. And so when the client is saying, I don't like this problem, I want to get rid of it, this other part within their system is saying, Well, I'd rather you keep the problem, because all that's going to happen from my worldview is you're going to swap this awful problem for an even worse one. And why would I let you do that? And so we start from that stance of this makes sense. We start from that stance that the problem in some way is essential to some part of the client's system. And so if we start from that starting point, we need to unpack, we need to discover what the worldview is of that part that views the change as a threat. Now, we can do that in a number of different ways, and we go into that in terms of the coaching academy. There's lots and lots of different ways in which we can do discovery work in order to learn what's really going on. What's really happening that means that there is a part of the client that doesn't want to change, even though the client themselves really, really does. When we do that work, what we're basically doing is we're taking stuff that is implicit, autopilot, old emotional learning that the client might not even be aware of at that point. And through various experiential ways and various ways of discovery through asking questions and setting up imaginal experiences and facilitating all of those kind of things, it's all aimed at trying to discover from the client and trying to help the client bump into this deep, implicit, emotional learning, which is in their present life driving the problem and ensuring that it's absolutely essential to keep the problem alive. There's a worldview that is held by a part within their system, if you think of it in those terms, and that part's worldview says, according to what I believe about the world, this problem has to be maintained and the change that you want has to be blocked. Now, when it comes to reconsolidation in a moment, the way reconsolidation works is that there is a mismatch experience which basically provides a prediction error to that old emotional learning core prediction. But of course, we can't intentionally facilitate a mismatch experience if we don't know what that implicit learning is that we're seeking to mismatch. We could do it by accident, but everything we do inside of the coaching academy is to ensure that coaches and therapists are getting consistent client transformations. And so, if no reconsolidation has happened, and so the client still has the problem because we're still in the middle of the process, but something has been revealed, that something that was below the surface is now above it, that the client has some sort of aha moment and understands what the system is up to, understands that there is a part of their system that is mitigating against the change for some good reason, and now has a handle on what that good reason is. That's a great session. And I see so many therapists and coaches who are kind of torturing themselves because reconsolidation hasn't happened yet, who really deserve to be giving themselves a hell of a lot of credit because something about that underlying belief, that underlying pattern has been surfaced and some learning has taken place. And now this nervous system response, or this old pattern which felt automatic, is now understood explicitly. And there is now often even a sentence, where we know what the worldview is. If I dare to make that change, then this bad thing will happen. And it's a real light bulb moment for the clients. And despite that, I see therapists and coaches beating themselves up because they think, well, I haven't got to reconsolidation, so that's not a good session. Well, I'm here to tell you that's a great session, because it's only a little bit like before. It's only when you get clarity on the problem that you can really do the discovery work well, to know why that problem exists, because otherwise you're going to be speaking to too many parts at once with too many different agendas. And then it's only when you actually get clarity on the discovery, where we take that implicit stuff and really understand what's going on, that we can do the next stage of the work, which is where we do get to reconsolidation, but we've got such clarity around what's really happening, what the world view is that's keeping the problem alive. We've got such clarity there that our mismatches that generate reconsolidation can actually happen. And so we've seen it's a great session if you're moving towards problem clarity and problem focus. It's a great session if your discovery work is ensuring that something that the client was holding implicitly is now above the surface and they're aware of it and they're able to hold on to that learning. That's a great session as well. And of course, the final criteria is that you actually do get to reconsolidation. It's the one everyone focuses on. But as you can probably see, it's not even possible unless you're able to have those other kinds of great sessions. And so this is why I'm doing this particular episode, because I really want practitioners to give yourselves credit for when you're doing the essential work of getting to reconsolidation. It's a little bit like baking a cake, I suppose. You can't bake the cake unless you've gathered the ingredients. And if someone's gathered the ingredients, that's not a bad thing to do. That's not a failure. In fact, it's a necessary prerequisite. And so some of your sessions will be ticking the necessary prerequisite boxes. And it's by ticking those that means that we're able to get to reconsolidation. Now, this is the really transformative part, of course. And so this is the part that we're all looking forward to. But we don't teleport to it. We have to travel through getting clarity of problem. We have to get discovery first. So that's just part of the map. And so we can feel a lot of pressure to get there because someone's in distress, and that's understandable. But actually rushing that sort of stuff slows us down, because the more we're just taking a pot shot and trying to hurry ourselves, the less accurate we're being. And the less accurate we're being, we're not getting those mismatches really tightly honed. So the third criteria, obviously, is, something shifts. We've attempted a reconsolidation. We've activated that old learning. We provided a mismatch experience, and the clients experienced something which provides a prediction error for that. And you've stayed within that juxtaposition, and you've repeated the activation and the mismatch together to such an extent that memory reconsolidation is triggered, and that old emotional learning no longer feels true. And once that reason for keeping the problem alive has been stood down, and that part no longer holds that worldview anymore, no longer views it as a threat for you to get the change that you want, then the change becomes really easy because there is no internal opposition. And so that's a great session as well, of course. But the reason for this episode is so many practitioners have led themselves to believe that it's only if you get to that reconsolidation that makes it a good session and everything else is terrible. And that's just not the case. Everything else is an essential ingredient to get into this point, is a key part of the map to get clarity at every level. Now, the formula for reconsolidation is that we activate the old learning, and it's the relevant old learning. It's the old learning which is keeping the problem alive, not just any old learning, and then mismatching it. But you can see there that we need to know that we're activating the right thing. And how do we know that we're activating the right thing? Well, because we've done the discovery work. And how do we know that the discovery work has been relevant? Well, because we've been looking at the opposition to changing the problem that we've clarified. So you can see how all of this ties together. And so if you've got problem clarity, if you've moved towards what they want instead, if you've focused in on the particular problem, or you're making progress to any of those points, great session. If you're doing the discovery work, and so it's getting clearer for the client, and they're uncovering stuff that they didn't know before, but only knew implicitly, and now they're very aware of it, and are having aha moments, and there are things that were under the surface that are now above the surface and known explicitly, great session. And of course, almost goes without saying that if you've achieved reconsolidation, then great session. but it's not the only route to a great session. Those other two are absolutely key as well. So I hope that this has been useful for you in terms of thinking about what makes a great session, not just the reconsolidation, but the discovery work that predates that lets you know what is the right thing to be activating and mismatching. And also, in order to do the discovery work well, getting clarity on the problem that you're working with. And so these are the three criteria: problem clarity, making things explicit that were previously under the surface with your discovery work, and then, of course, the really snazzy, exciting one that everyone focuses on, but can't actually exist without the other two, and that's reconsolidation itself. Now, it's kind of opportune that I'm talking about this, because what I'm going through here is a kind of roadmap of reconsolidation work. And at the moment, for the next few weeks, I am opening up 10 free 30-minute sessions. So I'm looking for 10 therapists or coaches who want to go through this client transformation roadmap with me one-to-one. And it's completely free. And I want you to do it. So don't think you're wasting my time. You'll be wasting your own time by not doing it, really, when you think about it. And I want to talk you through the client transformation roadmap one-to-one so it can be really applied to what's going on in your practice. And so by the end of that call, you've got a really clear idea of how you can think about the work differently and how you can use the roadmap in your own work. So we'll find out where you're up to. I'll talk you through the client transformation roadmap that we use inside the Coaching Academy, and I think is key to all truly transformative work, because all truly transformational work is going to involve memory reconsolidation, or the vast majority anyway. And so it's absolutely key to getting consistent client transformations. And so in those calls, we'll talk through your situation. I'll share with you the roadmap that we use when getting to transformation and getting to consistent client transformations. And then you leave with a sense of what needs to shift in terms of your work to become a much more effective practitioner, the kind of practitioner that everyone wants to work with. So if you'd like one of these, and I'd really like you to like one of these, then like I say, I'm opening 10 of these up. They're free. They're one-to-one. And if you go to freshtherapists.com, that's plural, freshtherapists.com/roadmap, then you'll get some more details, and there'll be a link there in order to book your call. Now, I'm just going to say again, the most common reason why people don't jump on a call like this, even though I'm offering it for free and I want you to come on it, is because people feel as though they don't want to waste my time. They don't want to jump on a call and go through this with me. But really, it's very, very helpful to me, because at the moment, as I often am, I'm updating and refining the Memory Reconsolidation Elite Coaching Academy. And so one of the things that really helps me to do that in a way which is useful to our members, to our coachees, if you like, one of the things that's really helpful is talking to therapists and practitioners to find out what the struggles are, what you're going through at the moment, who you're working with, when the struggles come up. All of that kind of information really helps me make the Coaching Academy better. So it's actually a lot more mutual than you would think at first glance. So they're free. They're one-to-one sessions. I would love you to take them because they help me anyway. And my real hope is that they're going to help you because, like I say, you'll talk through whatever's going on in your practice. I'll talk you through the client transformation roadmap, particularly in terms of how it fits what you just told me. And you will leave then with a really clear roadmap of what needs to be happening in your work to make you the most consistent, effective practitioner that you can be. So that's at freshtherapists.com/roadmap. And I hope to be talking to you one-to-one really soon. Take care now.